All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us today on The Kick. My name is Kyle Eason with Inception Integrated Marketing, and The Kick is presented by Mile High House. We're here today at Battery 621 on the rooftop. Beautiful day, a little bit hazy, but so glad to be here on a late summer's day. And we've got a very special guest with us today. His name is Donald Zuckerman. Donald is the film commissioner at the Colorado Office of Film and Television. We're very, very honored and excited to have him here with us today. Donald, welcome.
Thank you, Kyle. And by the way, it is extremely bright here, and I'm going to put these on for a while.
Totally understood.
The sun goes behind a cloud, I will take them off.
Gotcha. No worries. So today on The Kick, we usually start by asking our guests to tell us a little bit about their background. What are the highlights, the milestones that stand out to you? And you've got a fascinating background, Donald. Give us a little bit of a rundown of your background and what brought you here today.
Okay, so first of all, I'm old, so I've done a lot of things. So let's start with, I practiced law. I was a public defender in the Bronx for a number of years, and then I got out of that and fell in with some people, and we opened a nightclub called the Ritz, and the Ritz became a world destination for major bands. We were Performance Magazine's best club in the country for the 5 years that I owned it, and we had bands like U2 and Guns N' Roses, and Iggy Pop was our New Year's Eve show every year. I mean, literally the Police, Sting, Tina Turner. I mean, a thousand bands. And while I was doing that, I started to manage a baby band, and we got signed to Columbia Records, and we had a gold album, then a platinum album. And after that, I opened a restaurant. Then I decided to move into I had seen, when I was with the band, we were in Japan, we toured Japan, and I saw this thing called karaoke, and I opened the first karaoke place in America.
That's amazing.
And it was a huge success. After that, opened the second one in Atlanta, was opening one in LA, and kind of started to think about maybe getting into the movie business. While I was trying to get into the movie business, somebody showed me a tape of this crazy fighting that was going on in Brazil, and I started the first mixed martial arts company in America. We were actually the second to market after the UFC, but we survived for a while. They almost didn't survive as well, but they did. Then I started to make movies, and I produced quite a few feature films, and part of the reason I'm here, probably the reason I'm here, is 7 of the feature films were directed by George Hickenlooper. And George he's now deceased, but he was John Hickenlooper's cousin. And so I met John, and John was in our 4th movie. We made a movie, The Man from Elysian Fields, which I think is an outstanding movie, and it starred Andy Garcia, Mick Jagger, James Coburn, Angelica Houston, Juliana Margulies. George, one day, as we were standing on the street in Pasadena, and he said, "Hey, my cousin, a bar owner in Denver, is going to be here today, and he's going to be in an extra in a scene with Andy and Juliana." And so I met John, and got to know him. John was then in a second movie we did with Kevin Spacey, and actually had a line that time. And then he became, when he became governor, he asked me to come here and be the film commissioner. So I know that's kind of long, but
that's an amazing story. I love it. Can you tell us the name of the band with which you had so much success? I think you were the manager.
Sure. It was the band was named Scandal. There was a singer, Patty Smyth.
Yes.
And we had, a couple, we had a number of top 40 hits, and then a top 10 hit.
That's amazing.
And but they kind of went their separate ways at some point, and it ended. It
often does with the bands.
Yeah.
It often happens that way.
A lot of egos.
And interesting, with George Hickenlooper, you produced at least 7 or 8 films. Is that right?
I think 7.
Uh-huh.
7 or 6 feature films and one. I would call it like a documentary series called Hicktown about John Hickenlooper being the mayor. Yeah.
And how do you remember George? It looks like a pretty successful partnership. What are your remembrances of George?
I love George. I mean, George was a great guy. He was brilliant, great. Just extremely well read, extremely had great ideas, and he, as time went on, kept on. It's a craft, filmmaking, and he got better and better and better at it. And by our last movie with Kevin Spacey, he was really had arrived, and we were at a point where we could get major cast, and unfortunately came here one weekend right before John Hickenlooper was elected, and he died at 47 years old.
Wow.
Yeah. Sleep apnea.
Amazing.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. And that was really very interesting to hear your remembrances of George, too. I had never heard that kind of a personal recollection. Thank you so much for sharing that with us.
You're welcome.
What a fascinating background you've had. I'm kind of curious as to the turning points, particularly from owning the nightclub, working in the nightclub business, to filmmaking, and then filmmaking to working here in Colorado as film commissioner.
Well, first of all, everything's very different. I mean, I hadn't had an actual job since the late 70s. This was my first job. And so, when you have a job, I mean, when you're making movies, there's backers, there's always somebody you've got to in some way report to. But, when you're working in a government, there's more. I don't consider myself to be a bureaucrat, but there is some bureaucracy that you have to deal with. But so it's quite different. But on the other hand, it's been a really interesting experience, because when I came here, everybody said that we were never going to get a good incentive program here, and we've gotten one. It's competitive. It's not a little lower. It's 20% versus 25% or 30% in New Mexico and 25% in Utah. But we're getting movies here, and we're building a crew base and a business here. So I feel good about it.
We'll come back to that in a moment. I want to talk a little bit.
Let me see if I can.
Yeah, how are you doing there?
I think I'm getting more used to
Better?
the light.
Okay, good. It is intense up here, mile high, so that's how it goes. I just wanted to talk a little bit next. We usually talk about our guest's kick, the idea that is sort of special, has an energy of its own, and can sort of awaken or inspire people to take it up a level. Is there a certain idea or way of working that you have that is a kick, that is something special?
Well, I think for me, it would be fair to say that I've kind of blundered from one industry and one idea to the next. The common thread is that most of them are entertainment. The audiences might be different, but what generally has happened is somebody I would get involved with, or somebody I was friendly with, would come up with an idea, and then, or show me, or later on in the movie business, show me a screenplay that I sparked to. And not 99% of the time somebody tells you an idea, you don't want to put your energy into it, but that 1% when I really love something and I believe I can make a difference, my way of approaching business is I dive in and I attack and I get it done. And not always, but enough of the time that I feel that I've made a difference.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And I know we were chatting a little bit earlier, and one of the things you said was an advantage was first having a good idea, and then second knowing who to call. So it sounds like you have a lot of people in your Rolodex.
Well, it's absolutely a necessity. I mean, if you have a good idea and you don't know how to market it or who you can market it to, you can forget about it. And if you have a great Rolodex and you call people with a bad idea, they will not take your call next time. So, you have to be careful about how you approach, marketing an idea and turning it into reality. And, in ideas, I hate to use a cliche, but The ideas are a dime a dozen. You know, a lot of times you'll meet people and they'll say, well, I see that's happening. I thought of that. Well, yeah, but somebody else did it.
Yeah.
There's a difference between thinking about it and doing it.
Exactly. What is it about an idea that really sparks you, that really just seems to capture your attention? Maybe think back to a time when something just blew you away. What was it?
Well, it's something that I thought I could accomplish. I mean, so for instance, with the mixed martial arts, I had been in the boxing business. I left that out. So on a plane ride back from LA when I was managing Scandal, I sat next to a guy, and it was right after the 1984 Olympics. And it turns out that he had won the heavyweight gold medal in the 1984 Olympic boxing. And so I owned a restaurant, not the one I mentioned, but a different one at the time. And I invited this guy, Henry Tillman, and his trainer to the restaurant. And by the time I was done with dinner, I was his manager. And I managed him for 26 or 25 professional fights. It was a kick. It was fun. Didn't make money, but it was fun.
So, you know, the next thing that we like to talk about is where you
go
ahead. Go right ahead. Go right ahead. It's bright.
Apologize to the audience.
What's next for you? Here as film commissioner, you've had a kind of a roller coaster ride. It sounds like in was it 2015? The incentives were at $5 million. Now it's down to $3 million for the past couple of years. It makes your job a little more difficult, I'm sure. But tell us about where you're at now, what are the great triumphs you've had recently, and what's next for you?
Well, you know, first of all, we'd like to grow it, you know, and that's not up to me alone. Obviously, the governor has to agree to it, and key legislators, both Republican and Democrats, have to agree that it's worthwhile. But I think that the fact that we've gotten significant films here, we got Fast and Furious 7 came here, they were second unit, but huge, and they did all of those cars out of the C-130 scenes here, and they did all the road racing scenes at Monarch Pass, and then the Hateful Eight was here, and now, which I think this is the best yet, we have Our Souls at Night. It's Robert Redford and Jane Fonda. It's based on a Kent Haruf novel. He was a noted Colorado writer, lived in Salida, died 2 years ago, and he writes about life in Colorado, in small town Colorado. They're going to film in Florence, Canyon City, and the Springs, a little bit in Denver, and it's going to be great for the image of the state, and I predict that Ken Harris' novel, with the marketing, it'll get re-released, and with the marketing of the movie, it could make the New York Times bestseller list. So,
amazing, and there's a lot of success that'll just keep building from that.
And we're you know, we feel really positive about this project. This is a real, you know, this is something for families.
A lot of objections sometimes from legislators and others about the film incentives. What is the main thing you'd like to communicate today with regard to those objections? Why incentivize film and television in Colorado?
Well, we have two choices. Either don't make any of it or incentivize it. Nobody goes anywhere without incentives today. I've made 2 movies in Ontario with incentives. I made a movie in Michigan. I made a movie in Georgia. I made 2 movies in New Mexico, 1 in London, all with incentives. And without the incentives, either the movie isn't manageable, that extra money you get can make the difference between making the movie or not, and certainly you don't go anyplace without the incentive. So when I got here, not a single out-of-state film had come here in 5 years. Wow. And since we've started this incentive program, we've had many. And now we've started really a nascent film industry here. We've just recently had 3 movies shooting here, and more to come. I mean, they're on the small side, you know, $1 million or a little bit less, but you know, the people are energized, and it's incentive driven. They would not be here. We would have lost those filmmakers. So if we want to be in the content creation business, as you are, ultimately You need some money to do it,
You bet.
and you need colleagues and people who are trained and skilled to do it. And we're building that crew base here.
That's fantastic. Donald, is there anything else you'd like to add today you didn't have a chance to say already?
No, thank you.
Okay.
I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you.
You bet. Well, that's it, folks. What a beautiful day and a fantastic interview with Donald Zuckerman, Film Commissioner for the Colorado Office of Film and Television. That's it. Have a good day.
Thank you.